In the meantime, a row between Britain and France over illegal migrants has led to both sides resorting to threats. Officials in the French border town of Calais accuse London of stoking the situation and warn they could let thousands of migrants pass through the tunnel to Britain.
If it continues like that, with such outrageous provocations, I believe that at a given moment we're going to be provocative and say, let the migrants through, and David Cameron will have to deal with it.
The UK is also talking tough, as RT's Anastasia Churkin explains.
Mutual accusations, finger-pointing and a blame game seem to have taken center stage between France and the UK as they struggle to cope with the out-of-control migrant crisis that has been unraveling, that the two countries have now dubbed global. And this comes as claims started surfacing that Britain could potentially consider sending troops to Calais to target the migrant chaos that has been taking place on the ground there. And to this, of course, we saw this stern threat from France saying that what they could do is just let the problem go and let David Cameron deal with it. And of course, this is something that the UK said would be a breach of international law, that France does have the responsibility to control its borders. And of course, it said that the breakdown of relations between France and Britain is contributing and adding more problems to the already complicated situation that is taking place. Now, of course, also, we do know that Britain is not being shy in terms of throwing money around to attempt to try to tackle the issue that David Cameron has pledged an extra £7 million to tackle the migrant crisis in Calais. Most of this money would be spent on building extra fences. Now, at home, of course, the immigrant crisis is also a top priority. We did hear from Home Secretary Theresa May say, quote, "Our streets are not paved with gold." And we do know that next, evictions without court orders could start taking place and would start taking place. And another draconian, largely seen as a draconian measure of landlords not just being fined, but also possibly being thrown to jail for up to 5 years. So, of course, this is all basically causing lots of bickering and finger pointing, and it seems that the situation is quite tense. And what's going to happen next, we're going to have to wait and see how exactly these measures are going to be implemented and if they end up affecting the situation in any positive way.
The conflict on the UK-French border is only one among numerous migrant hotspots on the EU map. In Germany, official figures show the number of immigrants there reached 10 million last year, and that's an increase of 1 million in the past 3 years. And according to statistics, Greece has overtaken Italy as a major gateway for migrants from North Africa and the Middle East. A recent pan-European survey shows people see immigration as the greatest challenge facing the Union today, and has left behind concerns about a dire economic situation and soaring unemployment. RT's Peter Oliver has been to one Greek island trying to cope with the influx of migrants.
Here on the Greek island of Samos, you can see just how close Turkey is. That's it just over there on my right shoulder. Over here on my left, well, this is Greece, and it's the European Union. Now, this is why these islands in the Western Aegean have become the main landing grounds for refugees fleeing the Syrian conflict through Turkey. Every morning, a steady stream of around 100 migrants arrive on Samos's beaches. Not just Syrians, but also people from Afghanistan and elsewhere. Well, this beach is one that's used as a regular arrival ground for refugees coming from Syria, Afghanistan and elsewhere. And if you look around on the shore, well, it's easy to see their presence being here. This paradise beach has become a gateway on a nightmarish journey for so many looking to find an escape. Samos has seen a large increase in the number of migrants coming here. Local authorities say it's high time for the EU to do more.
In Samos, we have an increase of 300%. You can imagine how difficult it is to handle with every aspect of this problem.
A short journey from the beach and we come across families who have arrived in the early hours. Two brothers, Mustafa and Mujtaba, paid €5,000 each to come here from Afghanistan through Iran and Turkey before making the sea crossing.
There were 60 people in that boat. In a boat, I think actually it could take 20 people, but there were 60. And in the middle of the way, the boat didn't work, and we all thought we'll die, just like that.
Along the way, we come across more and more families, some with very young children. After spending around 7 hours in temperatures close to 40 degrees Celsius, Port Authority buses arrive to take them to the port of Samos.
Over the last 4 days, we have been able to arrest 2 men involved in a smuggling. Of course, as this continues, it becomes harder and harder task to confront this pressure.
It's here at the Citizen Identification, Processing and Detention Centre in Samos that this leg of these people's journey comes to an end. As you can see, it is pretty much like a prison. Most of those that we spoke to will spend around 3 days maximum here before being sent off to Athens, where there are larger facilities. But their journey only really begins then, as they get embroiled in the complicated asylum application system to allow them to stay here in the European Union. Reporting from Samos in Greece, for RT, I'm Peter Oliver.
Israeli police have started a probe into threats on social media against the country's president. Many Israelis posted angry comments online and even called him a terrorist within the government after the head of the state spoken out against a spike of recent attacks against Palestinians.
Flames have engulfed our country, flames which permit bloodshed in the name of love for the land of Israel.
Israeli government also green-lighted the extension of so-called administration detention against its own citizens. It allows authorities to hold suspects indefinitely for renewable periods of 6 months. And earlier, it was used only against those suspected of being Palestinian militants. The spike in tensions occurred after an arson attack by suspected Jewish extremists, which took the life of an 18-month-old Palestinian child in the West Bank last week. Venting their anger, Palestinians staged a number of protests across the West Bank. Some turned ugly as demonstrators clashed with IDF forces who were trying to disperse the rallying crowds. Former Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process, Alvaro de Soto, told us he believes Israel could do more to control Jewish radicals.
It's a specific sector of the population that seems to be causing these events. They feel encouraged by the intransigence of their government. I have no doubt that the Israeli authorities know who is doing this, and they have to find ways of controlling this.
Palestinian protesters, however, are angry not only at ultranationalists but at Israeli troops themselves. They say instead of protecting their children from possible threats, the soldiers have become a menace themselves. Since the year 2000, Israeli soldiers have killed at least 1,900 Palestinian children. In the first 3 months of this year alone, 30 young Palestinians have been shot and wounded by troops. Amram Goldblum from the Peace Now organization says the rift between the communities will remain if Israeli officials don't tackle the root of the problem and not its symptoms.
The settlements in the occupied territories of the West Bank are the source and the main source of incitations of violence, of racism against the Palestinians, of apartheid on the West Bank. And as long as the president does not mention that in his own words and talks against it, he is doing only half or 3/4 of the job, but not the full job.
And more stories will be coming our way after the short break. Just stay with us. A former prime minister of Ukraine vows to establish an alternative government, saying that current leadership has no legitimacy and has run the country into the ground.